Ready to dive into the Spanish economy today? Buckle up, because we've got some serious financial intrigue brewing, political scandal simmering, and a battle for the future of work heating up.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, but trust me, the connections between these stories are fascinating. We're talking about forces that could reshape not just Spain's economy, but its entire social fabric.
Let's jump right in with a potential financial earthquake, BBVA making a play for Banco Sabadell.
Okay, so imagine this. One of Spain's biggest banks swallowing up another major player. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
BBA is eyeing up Banco Sabadell, and if they pull it off, well, that's a whole lot of financial power concentrated in one place.
And unsurprisingly, this has caught the attention of Spain's Minister of Economy, Carlos Cuerpo.
Right, and he's not exactly thrilled about it.
Our source from RTVE, the Spanish public broadcaster, highlighted Cuerpo's concerns about stifled competition if this deal goes through.
And it makes sense when you think about it. Fewer players in the game often mean consumers get the short end of the stick. Less competition, less incentive to offer competitive rates or innovative services.
It's a valid point for sure, but here's the kicker. While the Spanish government might have reservations, the European Central Bank has given the green light.
Which is huge. The ECB's approval basically means they've scrutinized the deal and don't see it as a threat to financial stability in the Eurozone.
So one big hurdle cleared, but hold on, the plot thickens. This same RTVE source also mentioned a group of Sabadell shareholders who are less than thrilled, banding together to oppose the takeover.
Yeah, that's right. And that's not uncommon in these situations. They might feel the offer undervalues Sabadell, or they might be worried about losing their influence after a merger. Shareholder rebellions, even if they don't derail a deal completely, can definitely make things interesting.
Sounds like BBVA's got a fight on their hands. But even if this full-blown merger falls apart, they seem pretty determined to gain control of Sabadell one way or another.
They're playing the long game, that's much clearer. Maybe they'll try a hostile takeover, go directly to the shareholders, or maybe they'll start quietly buying up shares on the open market. It'll be interesting to see what strategy they use.
Okay, so big banks, big money, big power plays. But how does this affect the average person on the street? Could this merger actually hit their wallets?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Okay.
And honestly, it's too early to say for sure. Mergers of this scale can have ripple effects. Interest rates might fluctuate. We might see branch closures, job losses. It all depends on how BBVA chooses to integrate Sabadell if they do manage to pull it off.
So a lot of uncertainty still in the air. This whole situation really highlights how decisions made in those corporate boardrooms can have far-reaching consequences. Now, from high finance, we're shifting gears to the world of Spanish politics, where accusations are flying and a scandal is brewing. From billion-dollar mergers, we're stepping into the tangled web of Spanish politics, where a scandal with roots in the chaotic early days of the pandemic is back in the headlines.
And this is a prime example of how something seemingly isolated, like a corruption scandal, can have these far-reaching economic implications, shaking investor confidence and impacting a country's stability.
Absolutely. So let's unravel this. At the center, we've got José Luis Ábalos, the former Minister of Transport, caught up in what's being called the Coldo case.
The Coldo case, that's referring to Coldo Ochandiano, a businessman who was involved in supplying face masks back when, at the start of the pandemic.
Right, back when face masks were like gold dust. Our source at RTVE, Spain's public broadcaster, uncovered some pretty damning stuff, like a police report suggesting Ábalos might have used his position for some shady dealings, maybe even pocketed some kickbacks during those frantic months of procuring medical supplies.
Yeah, and this is where it gets even more complicated. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who initially defended Ábalos, is now singing a different tune.
Totally. Our source even quoted Sanchez saying there will be consequences. It seems like he's trying to distance himself from this whole mess. What do you make of that?
Well, it definitely suggests that the evidence against Ábalos is pretty serious. Serious enough that Sanchez is worried about the political fallout. This could have major repercussions for his administration.
And if that wasn't enough drama, it also turns out that Sanchez knew about a secret meeting Ábalos had with a Venezuelan vice president. And get this VP was banned from entering the EU at the time.
Yeah, not a good look. It raises serious questions about Sanchez's judgment, like, was he willing to overlook potentially unethical behavior within his own government? Not exactly a vote of confidence.
Definitely not. And of course, the political opposition is seizing on this, calling for a full-blown investigation. They're using this to try to chip away at the government's credibility.
Of course they are. Meanwhile, the government's over there insisting they're squeaky clean. It's a classic political standoff. Will we see more evidence? Resignations? Who knows how this is going to play out?
It's a reminder that economics and politics, they're inseparable.
Oh, absolutely. Political instability, especially when there are whispers of corruption, it makes investors nervous. And that uncertainty can trickle down and impact the entire economy.
And speaking of uncertainty and high-stakes negotiations, the Spanish government is facing some pushback on its plans for a shorter work week. Let's dig into that next, because this one hits close to home for a lot of people. So the Spanish government, they're really pushing for this shorter work week, aiming for that 37.5-hour standard by 2025. They're even putting their money where their mouth is, offering financial incentives to small businesses that get on board.
It's a bold move for sure. I mean, they're really trying to tackle this work-life balance issue head on. And who knows, it might even boost productivity in the long run. But, and there's always a but, big changes like this rarely come without resistance.
Yeah, and there's plenty of resistance brewing. Our RTVE source highlighted the pushback from some of Spain's biggest business groups. They're basically saying, hey, let companies and their workers figure out what works best for them. Keep the government out of it.
It's that classic debate, right? Government intervention versus free market principles. Businesses often argue that flexibility is key to staying competitive, while unions and worker advocates see government regulation as a vital safety net, a way to ensure fair labor practices and prevent worker exploitation.
And speaking of unions, they are all in on this shorter work week. In fact, our RTVE source mentioned that they're organizing protests, really ramping up the pressure on the government to get this done. It seems like everyone's digging in their heels, ready to fight for their vision of the future of work.
It shows you how deeply this issue resonates with people, right? I mean, there's a real yearning for a better balance between work and life. People are starting to recognize that constantly being on, working long hours, it takes a toll.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. We've got the government pushing for change, businesses pushing back, and unions turning up the heat. So what's your take? How do you think this might shake out? And what could it mean for the average worker in Spain?
It's hard to say for sure, but one thing's certain. The outcome of this debate, it's going to have a huge impact on Spain's labor market. If the government manages to pull this off, well, we might see a real positive shift in employee well-being, maybe even that productivity boost they're hoping for.
So lots of uncertainty, but also a lot of potential for positive change. It seems like no matter where we look in Spain right now, things are in flux, potential banking giants, political scandals, and now a potential revolution in the way people work. What a deep dive this has been.
Absolutely. And it really highlights how interconnected all these stories are. They might seem separate at first glance, but they all feed into each other, creating this a complex, multifaceted picture of where Spain's headed.
It really makes you think all these power plays, accusations, demands for change, it speaks to these larger forces shaping not just Spain's economy, but its entire social fabric. And who knows, maybe what's happening in Spain now, these trends, these debates, they're a sign of things to come for the global economy, maybe even a glimpse into the future of work itself. Something to ponder, right?
Absolutely something to ponder.